Lord, we thank you for our day today and for what you've given us, Lord, and we thank you for this class tonight, which is all about Jesus and the things that happened at the end of his life, the things that he said. And Lord, we thank you for the Gospels and what they communicate to us, but Lord, we just thank you for what Jesus did in his life. We thank you for this time of year leading up to Easter when we think about what happened at the cross, what happened in Jerusalem, and just really think about your life of perfection. Thank you for being the Lamb of God. Fill us with your Spirit tonight. Help us to really listen and listen to you and hear from you for our edification this evening. In your name, amen. All right. So tonight, we do talk about Christ, the life of Christ, how he died. It's an important study. What he said. Primarily that's thing, how he died and his resurrection and some important things that he said on certain topics. A lot of things that Jesus said, we could, and you have the Gospels to read all of them, but we're sort of focusing on a certain group of things that happened and how Jesus' life played out. Okay, so according to you ever heard of the Gregorians, the monks and everything like that? And Orthodox, I think they're Orthodox monks, Eastern Orthodox. Well, they have sort of a calculation, and they seem to think that they have pinpoint the date of Jesus' crucifixion as April 6th, 32 A.D. And so, I don't know how they figured that out, but it just is something that's out there that you read, but it's it's there. What day did Jesus die? Well, these people say that Jesus died on the 6th of April, 32. Okay, so, that would put him between 33 and 35 years old, which isn't important. Those kind of arguments, spending a lot of your effort and your research on those kind of arguments are really only, arguments for the head. They're like, there's only a small group of people that really care exactly what day Jesus died and exactly how old he was, and was Christmas really in December, or was it really wasn't he born? Those kind of things. You can talk about those kind of things, or you could do what Jesus said: go into all the nations and make disciples. So I think you're here in the college to learn something important about this specific part of Jesus' life, and so that you might share it more effectively. And it just really this explanation of how Jesus was brought to his execution, that's a bad word maybe. We shouldn't say execution, because Jesus was put on an instrument of execution, but he was not executed. Jesus gave his life. No man could take that from him. Only he could give it. And that's an important distinction. Because the death of Jesus Christ is really, we could talk about this four ways, okay? The death of Jesus Christ was a natural death. It really happened. He really did die. I mean, it was like, it wasn't like it wasn't a fantasy. He didn't live in suspended animation for a time. He really did die. It was a real, absolute death that happened. So it was natural. But it was also unnatural. It was or abnormal. It wasn't the normal kind of death, because he gave his life. So he gave his life. And so it was, he really did die, but it was natural in one way, that he was human, but unnatural in another way. The other word, there's a long word here. The death of Christ was what they said preternatural, or it was predetermined. So P-R-E-T-E-R, natural. Preternatural. And so that was, it was a death. It was a death that was determined. He was the Lamb slain from before the foundation of the world. So it was a determined death that would happen. And then the last part, the fourth thing, is that it was a supernatural death. And he says that in John 10, 17 and 18, no man takes my life, but I lay it down of my own decision. And if you read it, and you look at it, it says that when Jesus said his last saying on the cross, which is, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit, it says that he determined and bowed his head. It wasn't like, I commend my spirit, and then his head hung. In the movies, I don't think I've seen a movie that's done it right yet. It's like he says, it is finished, and then he commits his hand into the spirit, and then he's like, and then his head falls. That's a false demonstration. They don't really understand. It said he bowed his head. He's commended his spirit to God, his Father, and then he put his head on his chest, and that was the end. So the last saying of Jesus is committing his spirit to his Father. The last act of Jesus before his resurrection was to determinedly, or by his choice, to bow his head, and that's the way his life was finished there on the cross. But to get to the cross, Jesus had to go through an arrest and 2 sets of trials. 3 trials that were ecclesiastical, related to the temple and the Jewish government in Jerusalem, and then 3 trials, 3 separate kind of hearings, trials kind of things, whatever appearances that were related to the Roman government. So the Jews, the religious leaders, the Jewish leaders in Jerusalem, put together this really illegal and unfair and deceitful plan to get Jesus into their hands. And that's why the arrest happened at night. All right? They had to arrest him. Now remember, when he came into Jerusalem, how was he received? What was happening when he came into Jerusalem? Pardon me? They were celebrating, Hosanna, Hosanna. He came in on a donkey, a foal, a donkey that supposedly had never been ridden by a person before, but its owners sent him. The Lord has need of him. He comes into Jerusalem on a donkey. They're cheering for him. There was a lot of people visiting Jerusalem for the Passover, so there was a large group of Jesus' followers there. So the Sanhedrin is a council made up of about 70 men, 70 married men, who conducted the affairs of the Jewish region under the permission of Rome. Rome controlled the territory, and Rome had this policy of allowing religions to operate pretty much freely, except for the one thing: they couldn't kill people. They could not pass capital sentences on people. So in the books of Moses, we know that there were several crimes or violations of commandments that required people to be stoned. That was the way of Israel to execute criminals. But the Romans liked to make this display. Really, it was like the most efficient and cost-effective way to execute somebody is to chop off their head. There's very little pain to the person because the neck is severed from its nerve center, and so the person's head is where he doesn't feel the pain anymore. I know it sounds gruesome, but it seems like, and that's the most cost-effective way. But the Romans were interested in making demonstrations of political prisoners and political forces. So they contracted this way. It took 4 soldiers and and materials and all that kind of thing to crucify people. They had to whip them. They had to pound the nails in their hands. They had to get them up there. They had to watch them until they died. So it was the most expensive form of execution they had. They had hanging, and they had beheadings with swords, and they had poisoning. But this one was the way that they demonstrated, the humiliation. Strip somebody naked, nail them up there, let them have a long, slow, painful death, and that'll teach them never to challenge the authority of Rome. That's really what crucifixion was all about. Okay, but the first part of this Good Friday scene was the arrest. It's night. they bring a large contingent of people, maybe 1,000 soldiers, 600 to 1,000 men. They expected Jesus to run and hide. They expected a fight. They expected really that Jesus was like any other revolutionary leader. His people were going to be ready with swords. It was not going to be a simple affair. So, but they had to find a way to find Jesus in a place away from the crowds, so that it was a little cleaner. They could get him in their hands, get him to the Romans, and get him on the cross before anyone knew what was happening. So when we think about after the Last Supper with his disciples, Jesus goes to the garden, he prays, the disciples sleep, and shortly after midnight begins this ordeal. Well, the ordeal in the garden was one thing, but this was new. This was going to be a new thing. All right? So there you see, picture of Jesus in the garden. Torches, lanterns. Peter wakes up from his sleep, doesn't know what he's doing, swings a sword wildly and cuts off somebody's ear, but Jesus heals the man. And that's what that happens. But, this happened at night so that the Jewish authorities would not have to encounter the crowds. I just watched a little bit of the beginning. What's the picture of the year? Argo. I watched a little bit on the plane, just the beginning of it, and I wanted to sleep, so it just got too intense for me. And you see at the beginning of that movie a very real historical thing that happened when a group of student demonstrators, Muslim student demonstrators, destroyed the fencing that was surrounding the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and got into the building and took over the whole building. Anyone seen that movie yet? Yeah, so you see, very terrifying beginning, and that's a real thing. 60 people were held hostage for 444 days. It's kind of interesting, those 60 people that were in that embassy. So that was but that's, so you can understand how a mob, the Jewish authorities did not want a mob to get word that their teacher, their leader who fed them, healed their blind, was now being arrested. So six trials in 12 hours happened, basically, or something in that. So the 3 before the Jewish authorities, and then the 3 before the Roman authorities. So it's night. Jesus did not run when they came to get him. He presented himself, really. He just presented himself as, just as he would be the lamb. He knew that he was supposed to be an offering. So when they came to him, he did not run and hide. They fully expected to try and to have to search throughout the Garden of Gethsemane to find him, but he was there. Judas ran up to him, embraced him, and it says that he kissed him. And I want you to know that the word used there for the way Judas kissed him is the same word that's used for the prostitute when she kissed Jesus' feet again and again and again. Judas made an elaborate demonstration of who Jesus was by kissing him, several times, not just like once. All of the dramatizations of Jesus in the garden is just like a quick kind of thing. But really it was something that Judas wrapped his arms around Jesus and, kissed him again and again. And just, it's dark and Judas wants to earn his money. And, he's doing this, this demonstration. And Jesus really just looked at him and said, "Do you betray the Son of Man with a kiss?" And so Jesus, really told Judas right there. That may have been the point where Judas, started to fall apart. What's really in your heart? Do you realize what you're doing? And, there's some idea. Some people try to put a better spin on it. Like Judas sold Jesus because he figured that at a certain point, Jesus, of course, would use his supernatural power to get himself free. So this was a way to hurry the process along. Judas probably was very upset the moment that Jesus refused the offer to be made a king after he fed the 5,000 in John chapter 6. You remember they wanted to make him the bread king? You know the story, right? We're going to make you feed us food, 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 food. You are the king. You're going to be the king. And they were ready to carry him, into the throne room on their shoulders like a championship football coach. And it wasn't that way. Jesus went away from that. And so that may have been the point where Judas decided, this isn't going the way I thought it was. I really thought that, I'm going to be like, Jesus is going to be the prime minister, and I'm going to have a real good job in the cabinet, like all the other guys. But I handle money, so probably I'll be the finance minister. And that'll be awesome. I get to handle all the money, and we're going to be like the authority. It'll be like Solomon. And it didn't happen that way. So, but the disciples didn't know. That's the interesting thing. Judas walked with them for 3.5 years, and the disciples did not know him. So he was a very good hypocrite, maybe. Very good at masking what he really was. But then you read about the other disciples, and you find out that's not like, that's not like the, they're not all the sharpest tools, none of them were, all of them had their own little problems. Jesus, Peter with his roller coaster kind of faith, and then John and James were sons of thunder. A lot of emotion there in their lives. Thomas was always questioning everything. The guys were not quite sure. We don't know so much about the other guys, but, we have that. So Jesus had 3 trials, one before Annas, Caiaphas, and a small group, and then 3 before the Roman authorities. Once before Pilate. Pilate tried to get out of it, sent him to Herod. Herod didn't want to have anything to do with it, sent him back to Pilate. And that's, those were the 3 civil trials that went with the Roman authorities. So this is the first scene here. He's brought into the Jewish meeting. Now, the first person he was taken to was Annas, Godfather Annas. Let's just put it that way. Annas and his family had arranged like really a religious crime syndicate, and Annas was the godfather. They were ripping people off in the temple. And Annas, probably had been nursing this grudge to get his hands on Jesus ever since he made a whip of small cords and drove all the merchandisers out of the temple. Now, Annas' family made a lot of money, and Caiaphas, the high priest at that time, was married to Annas' daughter. So the son-in-law was the high priest only had a limited term, so you couldn't be the official high priest of the Sanhedrin and the temple. But Annas was like the godfather of the family. There was a new high priest in title, but the man pulling all the strings was this man. And so they brought Jesus to him first. What this was a special detachment of soldiers that was employed by the temple and worked in contract with the Romans. So this was a real police force. It was just under the control of the ruling authority, the Sanhedrin. These 70 to 73 men, this combination of men, had the authority under the permission of Rome, and they got Jesus. Now they're handling this little ecclesiastical affair. So, they bring Jesus in, and it was night. And this is an illegal thing. It was an illegal thing because it was any kind of trial was not supposed to be in that, at night. It had to be done in daylight. So the first 2 trials were illegal. The third trial, it was just to set up the third trial, which happened after the sun came up. Sunrise, that's the word I was looking for. After sunrise. So during the night, they make these things, and then the first official trial, the real official documented trial, according to Roman authorities, happened, around 5:30 a.m. or something like that, when the sun came up. But during the night, they got just enough people to make it technically legal by their law. And, it was like kind of a funny group of people when you think about it. Judas, what did Judas do with the 30 pieces of silver? No, what did Judas do with it, though? No, he didn't throw it in the field. Where did Judas throw the 30 pieces of silver? Threw it into the temple. And the temple guys, so these guys are like, they got the money back, but they can't, they're like so what's the right? They're so, what's the word? Anal retentive? That's probably the right word, if you know what that means. They were so fastidious is another word. They were so wedded to their processes that when Judas threw the money into the temple, they picked it up and they said, we cannot put this back in the treasury because this is the money. We bought a man with this money, and this man is going to lead to death. So they bought a field so that that money would not go back into the treasury. It would have been like a violation of one of their many hundreds of laws that they had calculated. So they were so clear about that they weren't going to do that. But then when they're trying Jesus in the middle of the night, they violate all their little laws. Like, what's that?
Put the money back into the treasury?
No, I don't think it's superstition. The Jews were not superstitious. They had lost superstition. The reason they had lost superstition is because when they were in captivity and saw the gods of Babylon and everything like that, they understood that those gods were no gods. And they understood that they really had the real God, but they just didn't know how to serve him. And they made these. It wasn't superstition. It was really that it was going to be. We can't put it in there because it's a violation. It would basically, I guess all of their laws were really superstitious. If you want to think of superstition in another way, like these are things that are stitched together. I like to think of it this way. These are stitched together. If you think of superstition this way, not the Stevie Wonder way, Stevie Wonder sang a song, Superstition, no, I guess you could listen to that song. It's not so bad. But anyway, I don't want to send anyone down the wrong path. But anyway, just take you back into your old life of listening to Motown all the time. That's okay. He'll be there. Anyway, because he never leaves you or forsakes you. Anyway, I guess the way to look at superstition is like it's the way men stitch things together to put stuff over top of their inadequacies, So it is like a superimposed kind of structure of life. Like if I have a rabbit's foot, I'm not really good, but if I wear the rabbit's foot, things are going to change, and I might hit the winning basket in the game. That might happen. Or if I wear my lucky socks every game during a winning streak, no matter how bad they smell, it's superstitious. It's sort of covering that thing. And, but then the laws that all these people made were really man-made things designed to keep people from, worshiping God and relating to him in the right way. And Jesus really started to tear all those things apart when he came. And so Annas, I'm back to Annas now. He was just looking for a way to get Jesus. So, I think the son-in-law is always trying to please the father of the bride, Well, that's a good thing. Since I'm going to have a son-in-law, and only one, I'm going to have to teach him how to please the father of the bride. And just make a note of that before I continue here. Okay. Anyway, don't anyone tell him now. All right? Don't tell him. Let that be my surprise, okay? All right? All right. So anyway, but the son-in-law is probably thinking like, look, I got Jesus. And it's, and aren't you proud of me? And Annas is probably thinking, good job. Now you're worthy of my daughter. And it's like that. It's like this is human nature. This is totally, and Pilate says it later on, this was totally an effort to get Jesus out of the way because they were really seriously threatened by his popularity. And so he was arrested. All right, now, no Jewish trial was supposed to be held at night. The law stated in the Talmud, the Jewish commentary, that the members of the court do not alertly or intelligently hear testimony in the hours of darkness. That's what the Talmud said. The commentary of the rabbis was that you can't hear the right way in darkness. All right? And often, if it was supposed to be a capital offense like this, after hearing a true testimony, they were supposed to, close the court, adjourn the court, and they were supposed to go, here's what the Talmud says about that. Those who are hearing the case are to go home, remain alone and separate, alone and separate from one another. Okay, so there's like 30 people. There's 30 people hearing the case. All 30 of them were supposed to go home and stay away from each other for 2 days. 2 days. And they were supposed to eat food, drink, sleep well, and then come back and hear the testimony again. Okay, so they hear the testimony once, they leave for 2 days, they come back and hear the testimony again, and then according to the Talmud, the Jewish council was then supposed to rule. If it was a case regarding someone who was supposed to be put to death, this was the way they were supposed to handle it. So 2 things are happening here. So they didn't do that. They didn't do that. None of these guys left. They got together, they brought him to Annas, then they brought him to the temple before Caiaphas, and they got the Sanhedrin together. After Jesus said a certain thing, after Jesus, they couldn't get the testimony to agree, and so after Jesus admitted under oath that he was the Christ, the Son of the living God, then they said, he's blaspheming. We don't have any need of any more witnesses. You have heard him. And after that, when he did that, when he made that statement, that powerful statement, that's like, there's some people who will tell you that Jesus never claimed to be the Son of God. And the reality is, Jesus did most definitely declare it under oath that he was the Son of God, and that he would return, and that he would be sitting at the right hand of power, and that he would return in the clouds of glory. He said those 3 things under oath before this meeting of the council in his trial. That's what he said. He said it. So Jesus most definitely declared himself to be the Son of God, to be the Christ. All right. So, huh?
The Herod that he had to go before, is this the same Herod?
No, different Herod. All right, now here we go. No arrests at night, had to be in daylight. No one cooperating in the arrest could be connected to the one who's accused. All right, so like Judas's participation was illegal. No Jewish trial held at night, I've said that already. Council could not immediately act. I just told you what they were supposed to do. And the vote for conviction was supposed to be taken from the youngest to the oldest. Everyone had to answer. So if 30 people are hearing the case, all 30 people had to say he deserves death, and all 30 people had to say it one at a time, youngest to the oldest. And then no trial could ever be held before only one judge, and never without a defense attorney. So Jesus was supposed to have someone of the temple pleading his case. So those were the violations there. Right, now here's the timeline. Now don't try and take all these notes, because it's like I just want to give you, I put this together to give you an idea of the kind of fast and furious way that this all happened. At one point in the night, Jesus Christ is celebrating with all of his disciples, his 11 men, and they're eating, they're celebrating communion. Judas is gone. He's telling them great stories about how, he's telling them about the future, how the Holy Spirit is going to come. They don't really know what they're hearing so much, but then they go to the garden. Jesus has a great wrestling match with the forces of evil, and he pushes his way through that demonic confrontation, and now he's in the hands of men. So at this point, Jesus is going to commit himself to the hands of men. When he comes out of the garden, he has committed himself to the hands of men. On the cross, he'll commit himself to the hands of the Father, his Spirit. But here, he's going to give himself to the hands of men to be sacrificed for the sins of the world. So you could see how fast this happened and how they were in such a hurry to get this done, get him on the cross before all of his followers knew about it. 1 o'clock in the morning, there's a confrontation and the arrest, and his first trial, his first hearing before Annas, he's there. And this is where he receives his first physical abuse. The way the Roman soldiers would chain somebody up was usually to tie their one arm way up around their as far as they could bend it back on their shoulder blade, and then they would put like a loose noose around your neck. So basically, Jesus was being led like a dog. He has one arm tied behind his back, and he's being led with a rope, through Jerusalem. All right? He had spoken all the time in the temple steps. He had been there all the time. They could have captured him at any of those moments. But when they sent guys to capture him, the guys were like captivated by his speech. No one speaks like this man. We can't arrest this man. But Jesus is arrested. And it was a tremendous confrontation. And when he said, "I am," all the guys fell down, and really demonstrating his power and everything. Trial number 2 happened at with the Sanhedrin court. And they beat him, and they started to mock him. All right, they mocked him when he said that I am the Messiah, I am the Christ. They said we don't have any need of any more testimony. He has blasphemed. So they put a bag over his head. They started like smacking him, and they started saying, mocking him, prophesy, who hit you? Prophesy, who hit you? Prophesy, who hit you? So they will mock him. So the religious court will mock him for his claim or his declaration that I am the Messiah. Later on, the Romans, the soldiers, will mock him because of his declaration that he is a king. He declared himself to be the Christ to the high priests and his council, and then when he was with Pilate, he said, I am a king, but I'm not a king of this world. So he'd said that to Pilate. And the soldiers, they put the crown of thorns on him, beat him, put a purple robe on him, bowed before him, kissed, pretended to kiss his feet, all of that. And they mocked him for his declaration that I am a king. So one group mocks him for declaration of being the Messiah, the Christ, and this group beats him and mocks him for declaration of being a king. So now at 3 o'clock in the morning, they have figured out they've got something. He said he's the Son of God. He said he's the King of Israel. So we've got something to do to take him to Pilate, the Roman authorities. So they wait until the sun comes up at 5 o'clock, 5:30. When the sun comes up, now they can do the legal thing. They all get together. They all know the way they're going to vote, and they all decide that we're going to hand this person over. We have the authority. We're going to hand this person over to the Romans authorities so that he can be executed. So that the first legal thing that happens here is at 5 in the morning when the sun finally comes up. And so the number 4 trial, about an hour later, there is a healing before Pilate, and he says, I find no guilt in this man. And then they hear that he's from Galilee. And that means that he belongs under Herod's jurisdiction. This is not the same Herod. This is the grandson of the Herod who was alive at Jesus's birth. This is the grandson of that, couple Herods in between. The Herods were another crime syndicate controlling, political criminals who took bribes and really abused his people and all those kind of things. And there's another, there's a whole, we'll talk about all the Herods when we get into another one in the book of Acts, because there's another Herod and, that kind of thing. But he has this hearing. And Herod really wanted to see Jesus do a miracle for him. He wanted to see Jesus walk across his swimming pool. Come on, you're the king of the Jews. Show me what you can do. Prove to me that you're no fool. Walk across my swimming pool. That's the way that the song in Jesus Christ Superstar goes. That's what, and it's pretty accurate. This is what Herod wanted. He wanted some entertainment. He thought he was John the Baptist raised from the dead again, and he's like, who is this Jesus? And he wanted to see Jesus do something. Jesus didn't say anything in his presence. Wasn't going to have anything to do with it. And the picture of it in The Passion of the Christ, that movie, is like really pretty good picture of probably what Herod was like. He had like a toupee kind of thing going on there, lots of dancing girls around him, and he was just like, he just lived off of the people, fed his life of luxury. And like when he saw Jesus, he thought of Jesus as just like, wow, this is like, it's like Beyonce coming to my house or something like that. Let's just have like something, let's have some entertainment. Come on, Jesus. I'm sorry, Beyonce does. Maybe that's wrong. Maybe that's too big of a political statement, isn't it? Right? That's the way he saw it. I made maybe too big of a political statement right there. But I'm sorry about it. Not really. I don't care. You can. Anyway, take a drink of tea and we'll start again. How you doing there out in DVD land, internet land? You all right there? You enjoying our class? We just got back from Eurocon, so we're kind of sleep deprived, so this could be like a wild and woolly affair. Just stay tuned. It might be a class that you laugh a lot at. Maybe not. But we're talking about something really serious. So anyway, back to the class here. All right. Pilate repeatedly tried to release Jesus, but the Jewish leaders objected, and they finally got Pilate to do what they wanted him to do, which is, crucify Jesus Christ. He gave in to their will. And, pretty much, Pilate was not in good standing with Caesar in Rome. There had been some trouble there. There had been some things that happened. The Romans liked order. They liked everyone to be fat, dumb, and happy. That's why they created the circuses and the other kind of social systems to make sure everyone was fed and entertained. People stay happy that way. And in Pilate's territory in Judea, there was always trouble. There was always trouble in Judea. It was like everything was always happening there. And Pilate had some problems, and Caesar was not happy with him. And so when they said that you are not, they pulled out that big weapon, that big statement at the last minute. If you do not crucify a man who says he is a king, you are not Caesar's friend. And that was enough. That was enough for Pilate, like, okay, all right. I've beaten this guy beyond recognition. I might as well just kill him, for the sake of this people. And it's like, it's just another subject. It just shows, people think of the Roman as being a just kind of empire. It was really predicated on brutality and total control. Why do you think Adolf Hitler wanted his German empire to be the Third Reich, like the third incarnation of the Roman Empire? There was the Roman Empire, there was the Holy Roman Empire, and now there's the Third Roman Empire, is what Adolf Hitler really wanted to establish. 1,000-year reign of the most intelligent, athletic people on the planet. Me and my people will do this. And so the Romans were brutal in the way that they were going to control this. And so when Pilate saw this, it was like, it's not like, he was ready, he was going to save his own skin. And when they said something like that, the high priests knew what they were playing with. The same kind of people. It's wickedness begets wickedness. It was if you don't kill a man who claims to be a king, you are not a friend of Caesar. And so Pilate agrees to do that. And you see, that's a pretty accurate picture of the way that the soldiers beat on Jesus. Push the crown of thorns upon him and really just mocked him. You are the king? What is with this? You are the king? Really? So pounding the thorns into his head. It's really, and there we see that Pilate just says, I wash my hands of this whole thing, and I'm going to let you crucify him. We're going to crucify him because you want it, and that'll save that. So the timeline now, 9 o'clock to 12 noon, Jesus is forced to carry his own cross. He's forced to carry his cross, and then Simon of Cyrene then comes along to help him up the thing. It took a while. This is the most, Jesus has been beaten and bruised and scourged and everything by the Romans. And now this is it's going to be a slow march through. Like I said, the Romans were interested in making spectacles of the political people that they were going to crucify. So this was not like a quick little parade up a small hill. This was like a parade through the city, Jesus carrying his cross. And there is a moment, there's two things that you should know, that the carrying of the cross was a declaration of guilt. And so at a certain point, Jesus gives up the cross. Everyone thinks it's just because he's bloodied and he's exhausted. That's part of it. But another part of it is Jesus was a man without sin. Without sin. At a certain point, when you got to a certain place there, and there was a real proclamation that this was a guilty person deserving of death. This is what the Romans did. When the Romans found somebody to help them with the cross, it was more than just an act of help. It was more than just an act to make sure that the cross got up the hill. It was also a thing to say that, okay, this man carrying the cross is guilty of something, but the man that we took it from is not guilty of something. It was a subtle thing. It's a subtle thing, but that was part of it too. You were made a spectacle. You are a guilty person. Look at what the guilty person has to go with. Don't mess with us. We are the Romans. And this is what we do to people who mess with us and pretend to be kings and think that they can take our authority. And this is a guilty person. This is, what's he guilty of? This is the crime that he's guilty of. And even the wording, that was what was such an interesting thing. Pilate words these things, the King of the Jews. It's like it's not a declaration. It's a simple declaration. It's not like it doesn't list a crime, the offense, the real offense. It's just the King of the Jews in 3 different languages. That's the statement that was tacked to his cross. So that was also like sort of all of this means something. And so then the timeline, 12 noon to 3 p.m., we know that there is the 3 hours of darkness on the cross. For the space of 3 hours, there is darkness, a supernatural darkness, darkness in the middle of the day, a darkness that apparently, judged on reports from South America and the Far East, this was a darkness that enveloped the whole earth. This was not just a solar eclipse where just one part of the world was in darkness. This was a darkness that circled the globe at this moment. Yeah, it's recorded. It's recorded in records in the Far East and records in Peru. If you believe the Mayans, they had the end of the world right, didn't they? No. But they kept good records, and there is about the time of Jesus' death, reported according to this, about the time they have this recorded dark day, and no one can explain it. And of course, in the South America, the worship of the sun was huge, throughout history. So we don't, when they record a dark day, it was a dark day. Far East also. Japan used to be the land of the rising sun. So anyway, so for 3 hours on the cross, Jesus was in darkness. And you could look at it this way. He was in darkness, and this is the moment when he was separated from the Father and the Spirit. Jesus is a man. He who knew no sin is made sin for us at this point. The sins of the past, 1 hour. The sins of the present time there, 1 hour. The sins of all the future times, 1 hour. There are those moments of darkness. You could break it down that way. Why 3 hours? That's the way I like to think of it. All the sins that came before that day, all the sins that were happening at that moment, multitudes, and all the things that were happening before. Remember, if all sin has been put on Jesus, where do all demonic forces have to be? Where all sin is. So, demons work through the power of sin. So the demonic presence that must have been in that area must have been remarkable. And Jesus feels it, and he says what he says. We're going to go through everything that he says in the next part of the class. So there's the death that happens, and the Romans pierce his side, and then there is the burial before sundown because it's going to be a high Sabbath. They don't want the dead body to make the city unkosher, all right? Like the high priests are like, let's kill the guy and let's make sure that he's down off the cross before the Sabbath happens. So very calculated strategy of these men. We got the money from Judas. We're going to arrest Jesus. We're going to have this trial. Pilate tries to do something to get him free. He can't do it. Goes to the cross. It's over, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Joseph of Arimathea gets his body. Nicodemus comes also out of the darkness. Nicodemus, who had came to him at night, comes out of the darkness, bringing spices to treat the body, to be, so that it would be preserved. And all this has to happen because usually they would bury the bodies really quickly, just like the Muslims do. The Jews like to bury their bodies within 24 hours. But because of the high Sabbath and no one was going to be able to touch the body without being unclean, they wanted the body to be put away. So the body's put into a place, a tomb, and sealed, and all that happens before sundown and the high Sabbath of the Passover that's coming. And there you see. That's really, just the picture of what he was like. That's probably even too pretty. It's better in color. It looks, gruesome and everything like that. And we've seen that, if you've watched The Passion of the Christ, You know how gruesome that, and that's probably not, that just, a minuscule amount of it, of what kind of thing happened there. I really think, like, why did Jesus endure such punishment? Why was there such fury thrown at him at this point? Again, like I said, if all sin is being put upon Christ, then where do the demons have to be? I just think you can really, you can really think of it that way. And so, throughout all of Jesus' life, Satan had been tempting Jesus with every kind of thing. Jesus was tempted in every manner that a man could be tempted of. I'm sure that Satan sent women in front of him. He sent the power of all the kingdoms in front of him. He tried to get him to turn a stone into bread, hunger. All of those tests came Jesus' way. And now, why was this such brutality? I think Satan figured, if I can just get him in enough pain, he's going to do something out of order, and this whole plan is going to be fractured. But it didn't work. Jesus did give his life, and Satan celebrated, celebrated like he had won, But, Satan is irrational. Jesus did die, and, Satan had seen many people die, and no one had ever come back from the dead. Yes, Oliver?
I love Pastor Stephen's message, the greatest battle ever.
Yep, greatest battle ever fought. It was, Jesus did not have a sin nature. Okay, that's true. He did not have, he was conceived by the Holy Spirit in the womb of Mary, so he did not have like the natural bloodline. He had precious blood. But don't think of that, don't think like that, like what Jesus did for 30-some years as being like a simple thing to do. There is a being in our Bible that also was created perfect and great position, and there was iniquity that was found in him, and that is Satan. So don't think that just because Jesus was God, that this was like a simple process for him to go through and to live all these years perfectly and in order in obedience to the Father, being led by the Spirit. He was a real human. He had real emotions. He felt real pain, and he did not at any point think a wrong thought or make a step out of disorder according to the purpose and the plan of the Father to satisfy the holiness and the justice that had to be paid. The wages of sin, death, something innocent had to die. Jesus had to keep his innocence, had to walk through 30 years. So you think about Lucifer lived in the perfect environment of angelic spheres and the angelic universe, bringing praises before God, and at a moment in his history, he decided that he wanted to be something else. He wanted to be worshipped rather than to lead the worship of the Holy One. And so that happened. And so I'm saying that if you think it was easy for Jesus to live 30 to 35 years without sinning, just because he was God and man, he was God. Of course it was simple for him. Don't think of it that way. This was like the fact that he got to the cross as an innocent, perfect, spotless person is a miracle in itself. It took daily decisions throughout his life for Jesus Christ to think the right thought so that he could be the sacrifice for all men. Yes?
Yeah, I think another picture to really make it more clear is when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane.
Yes.
If it was that easy, he wasn't going to cry to the Father and even...
Yeah, if it's not you're right. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus said, why? On the cross, he said, why have you forsaken me? In the Garden of Gethsemane, he said, is it possible? If this cup can pass me by, is it possible? But if it's not, your will be done. So, yes.
Look at that. Satan was really being bold because Satan knew that was also God as well. Though.
Well, okay. Well, the thing we have to understand about Satan is he's psychotic. All right? Satan is out of his position. He's alienated from God. He's got all the emotion. He's got no human body. But psychotic people. They're out of their minds. Even though a psychotic person can know the absolute truth, but if that person is filled with envy and jealousy, he will believe anything, that he can do anything. He believed that he could defeat the Son of God. That's just how arrogant he is. He has no fellowship with the Father, so he has no sense of real reality as the sense that God can give him, because he's forsaken that part of what he was supposed to play, by trying to exalt himself to a new level. So the emptying of the fury of demonic forces upon the body of Jesus was really, I think, it was there was a book written called The Last Temptation of Christ, and it's a novel, and it makes it out that Jesus is having dreams about Mary Magdalene while he's on the cross. It's a wicked book. Don't even watch the movie. Don't read the book. But the real last temptation of Christ is the pain that Satan inflicted. And then there was that little, Jesus is walking there in pain, and he just tries to get Jesus to take just a little bit of a drug to try and deaden the pain. That would have also put him into disorder. Because, drunk people say stupid things in the wrong times. So Jesus taking that little thing into his mouth would have also violated the purity of his life. So when he tasted what it was, he spit it out before it could go into his system. So it's a miracle that Jesus got to this place, bowed his head, gave his life for us, and that's amazing. Okay, let's see where. All right, so we'll talk about the resurrection when you come back. All right, resurrection appearances of Jesus, and then the 7 sayings on the cross. Take a 10-minute break.